Let the night wrap around you.
The world before the flood, a gentle descent into the lost age of ice and water.
Close your eyes. Let the world outside fade into a soft blur.
The air grows still.
The rhythm of your breath begins to match the steady, timeless pulse of the earth itself. A slow exhale, a quiet inhale, as if the planet were breathing with you. Now imagine the night stretching endlessly above. The stars shimmer like frozen drops of light suspended in the dark sea of the cosmos. Somewhere beyond them, time turns backward, drifting through centuries, then millennia, until the familiar world dissolves into another age entirely. The air feels colder there. The horizon glows faintly blue, brushed with ice and snow. Vast glaciers rise like mountains of glass. The wind carries the soft sound of frozen rivers shifting, creaking, murmuring to themselves. And beneath it all, there is silence. A silence so deep it seems to cradle the whole earth in its stillness. In this ancient world, great herds of mammoths move slowly across white plains. Their heavy footsteps press into the frost, leaving trails that fade under falling snow. Above them, the sky glows pale, the light of a sun filtered through endless clouds of mist. Humanity exists only in small, scattered groups, moving quietly along the edges of survival. Fires flicker in stone shelters, and voices murmur in unknown languages, telling stories to hold back the dark. The planet itself is changing. Deep beneath the ice, the heartbeat of the earth begins to shift. Rivers swell, the air grows warmer, seasons lengthen and break apart. The snow melts a little earlier each year. It feels as though the long winter is finally releasing its hold, as though a new world is about to begin. But change, in the deep memory of the earth, is rarely gentle. It arrives in waves, slow, unseen, unstoppable. And somewhere far to the north, the balance tips. A glacier cracks, a lake bursts free. The water moves with the quiet power of inevitability, sweeping across plains and valleys, reshaping the land as it goes. From that moment, the story of the world will never be the same. Tonight, as you drift deeper into rest, we will follow that ancient tide, a journey backward through the hidden history of water, ice, and fire. We will walk softly through the landscapes of memory, through the echoes of floods and forgotten civilizations, through time itself, until the earth of 13,000 years ago rises again in your mind like a distant dream.
There is no need to think or analyze or question.
Simply breathe and let each word carry you further from the present until the boundaries of time begin to blur and the story opens before you, calm, vast, and quiet. Now we begin. 13,000 years ago, the world was thawing. The ice that had covered continents for tens of millennia began to retreat. Rivers burst from their frozen cages, winding through valleys of stone and snow. Forests stretched into the open light once more, and the air filled with the scent of new growth. To the people who lived then, small bands of hunters following herds across the plains, the earth must have seemed reborn. The long cold was ending, and a gentler age was stirring on the horizon. But the calm was brief. The warmth faltered. In only a few decades, the fragile balance of climate shifted again. The temperature fell sharply, the winds grew harsh, seasons turned uncertain, and the rhythm of life fractured. This 1,000-year winter would later be known as the Younger Dryas, a sudden return to cold, a pause in the great thaw. Across the continents, rivers froze, storms gathered, and the seas began to rise. Landscapes changed faster than generations could adapt. It was an age of water and silence, of ice returning to reclaim the land. And yet, even in that frozen dusk, life endured.
Fires still burned in hidden valleys.
Stories still passed from voice to voice, carrying memories of warmth, of loss, and of survival. The flood was coming, but for now, the world simply held its breath. Echoes beneath the snow, the quiet turning of an ancient world. 13,000 years ago, the earth was quiet in a way that feels impossible now. The sky was soft and pale, stretched endlessly above white plains and silver rivers. Beneath that stillness, the world was shifting, slowly, silently, as if breathing in after a long, frozen dream. The last great ice age was loosening its grip. Mountains of ancient ice began to melt, their edges dissolving into streams that wound through valleys and forests, just beginning to return. The sound of melting was faint, like distant rain. Drops of water ran down glacial walls, gathering into trickling paths that would someday become rivers. The air grew gentle again, touched by warmth that carried the scent of thawing earth and young grass. Across the continents, vast herds of mammoths and bison moved carefully through the mist. Their shapes glowed golden under a weak sun, their shadows long and wavering across the snow. Wolves followed quietly at a distance, their breath rising in clouds that vanished into the wind. Birds migrated north once more, their cries weaving through the cool air like threads of memory. And somewhere among the rocks and trees, small bands of humans watched the changing light. Their fires burned low, their voices soft against the hum of a world awakening. For the first time in countless generations, the ice began to retreat. Glaciers pulled back from the coasts, revealing valleys that hadn't felt wind in thousands of years. Forests crept slowly into the open, and rivers grew deeper, stronger, alive again. In those days, the Earth must have felt like it was being reborn. A planet shaking off its long slumber, stretching under the pale spring sun. For a while, everything seemed still and balanced, as though the worst had passed, as though the long night was finally giving way to dawn. But the warmth did not last. The shift came quietly at first, so subtle that no one could have seen it coming. Clouds began to gather differently. The winds changed their path. The nights grew longer again. The cold returned, not as a whisper, but as a sudden, sharp breath, sweeping across plains and oceans with a force that silenced birds, froze rivers, and turned forests back to stone. It happened quickly. Within a few short decades, the fragile calm that had promised renewal was gone. Temperatures dropped by 15 degrees across the northern world. The rivers that had just begun to flow now locked themselves in ice once more. Snow fell heavier and stayed longer. The wind hardened into a living thing, cutting through valleys and mountain passes, reshaping everything it touched. This was the Younger Dryas, a 1,000-year winter, a pause in the great thaw, a return to silence. Imagine that world. The days were dim and brief, the nights stretched endlessly, lit only by the flicker of firelight against walls of rock and ice. The sound of the wind was constant, a soft, low moan, rising and falling like the breath of the planet itself. Even in the deep cold, life continued. Hunters tracked the last herds through fields of frost. Fires glowed in hidden caves, and above it all, the aurora shimmered across the frozen sky, a slow dance of green and violet light rippling over the white horizon. People survived by moving with the land. They learned the rhythm of the seasons, when the ice loosened just enough to fish, when the herds returned to feed on frozen grass, when the snow crusted hard enough to walk upon. They slept close together, wrapped in furs, whispering stories into the dark to keep fear at bay. Stories about warmth, about the stars, about the time before the cold came back. The earth had entered a strange balance, neither fully frozen nor truly alive. Lakes shimmered beneath thin layers of ice. Forests held their breath, waiting for spring that never seemed to come. The air was filled with the scent of snow and smoke, the quiet rhythm of a world in limbo. Beneath the surface, enormous lakes pressed against their icy walls. Great sheets of frozen water, stretching for hundreds of miles, held back with quiet tension. Each day the sun rose and set, melting a little, freezing again. Pressure built. Deep cracks echoed across the glaciers like distant thunder. Somewhere, far to the north, one of those walls gave way. The sound must have been beyond comprehension, a roar rolling across the sky, water bursting free with unstoppable force. Torrents rushed down from the highlands, carving new valleys in hours, sweeping forests, stones, and everything living before them. Rivers that had trickled calmly became walls of water, taller than trees, faster than wind. The earth was being rewritten by flood. And yet, after the first rush, there was peace again. The floods left behind smooth plains and shining lakes, the air filled with mist and silence. The land, newly carved, glimmered under the cold sun. To those who wandered through it, the world must have felt strange, familiar, but changed in ways too vast to name. In time, the survivors learned the new paths of rivers, the shapes of mountains that hadn't existed before. They followed the water, finding food where life returned. Each dawn brought light that glowed faintly through the fog, and each night the stars returned to their places above the snow. The cold endured for 1,000 years. Entire generations lived and died under its breath. They watched the land shift around them, and in their quiet, patient way, they adapted. The glaciers advanced, then retreated again. The air warmed, then cooled. The earth moved slowly, as if undecided between two ages. One of ice, one of bloom. Through it all, the humans remained. They built fires that crackled against the endless night. They carved stones, painted on cave walls, and told stories about the rivers that had drowned valleys, the winds that had torn trees from the ground. They spoke softly of the time before, when the world was warmer, when the coasts stretched farther, when the sea was low and the plains were wide. And somewhere deep within those stories, perhaps without knowing it, they began to remember. They remembered the flood. Even now, the traces of that age remain, hidden under soil beneath the ocean, carved into the memory of stone. Vast canyons mark where waters once tore through rock. Fossils lie scattered across plains that were once seabeds. The earth carries the faint scars of its own transformation. When the cold finally lifted, it did so slowly, like a curtain rising after a long, still night. The glaciers withdrew, the rivers widened, the first forests of birch and pine took root again. The wind softened, carrying warmth and birdsong through the valleys. Those who lived to see it must have felt the change deep in their bones. The return of green after endless white. The thawing of rivers, the hum of insects, the light of longer days. The world was breathing again. And so the story continued, quietly, steadily. The people followed the warmth, settled near rivers, began to shape the land with their hands. They built homes of stone, planted seeds, watched the stars with wonder. The ice had taught them patience. The floods had taught them resilience. And from the memory of those 1,000 years of cold, humanity carried forward a kind of calm, an understanding that the Earth would always move in cycles, that time itself was as fluid as the waters that once remade the world. Tonight, as you drift through the hush of this ancient landscape, imagine the sound of that world, the soft wind gliding over frozen plains, the slow drip of melting ice, the quiet heartbeat of a planet in transition. Let it carry you back through time, not to fear, but to stillness, not to loss, but to renewal. The Ice Age may have ended, but its whisper remains gentle and endless, echoing through the quiet corners of the mind, reminding us that even after the longest winter, the Earth always finds its way back to spring. Whispers beneath the ice, when water and fire shaped the sky. There are moments in Earth's long memory when the rhythm of nature changes its pace, when the quiet breath of the planet becomes uneven, as if something vast and unseen has stirred deep within. One such moment came at the end of the last ice age, when the air trembled with warmth and the frozen world began to thaw. What followed was not a single event, but a slow turning, an unfolding of forces so great, so ancient, that they reshaped both land and sea. It was here that water and fire, two timeless elements, met in silence and remade the face of the world. Imagine the North American continent as it was then. Enormous lakes of meltwater shimmered beneath a pale sun, their surfaces like sheets of glass. Each morning, thin mists lifted from the ice, curling into the quiet air, while distant mountains still held their crowns of snow. Beneath these glaciers lay pressure and power, the weight of ages pressing down on the water trapped beneath. For thousands of years, those frozen walls had held steady, keeping their secrets, but nature never holds still for long. One season, perhaps after a summer slightly warmer than the rest, the ice began to fracture. Cracks spread like veins of light across the frozen plains, small at first, then widening with every hour of sunlight. Deep within the glacier, ancient water stirred, restless, heavy, waiting. And then, without warning, the walls gave way. What followed was neither chaos nor violence, but the slow unfolding of inevitability. A deep, thunderous sound rolled across the land as the meltwater burst free, cascading down from the highlands in waves that shone like liquid silver. Valleys filled, rivers swelled, and plains disappeared beneath the endless movement of water. The earth itself seemed to sigh, exhaling centuries of frozen breath. These floods, immense and unstoppable, traveled eastward until they reached the edge of the continent. There they poured into the Atlantic Ocean, vast volumes of cold, fresh water colliding with the salty sea. The balance of currents shifted. The great conveyor of warmth that circled the northern hemisphere slowed, stumbled, and changed direction. In its wake, temperatures plunged. The warmth that had promised spring was replaced by a sudden, lingering cold. The winds changed first. They carried a sharper bite, a whisper of frost that lingered even under sunlight. Clouds grew thicker, heavier, their bellies swollen with snow. Across Europe and North America, the return of winter came not as a season, but as an age. Forests froze where they stood. The ground hardened, rivers stilled. It was as if the world had paused mid-breath, a 1,000-year heartbeat frozen in time. But water was not the only hand guiding the change. Far above, in the quiet black of space, another story was unfolding. Some say that a fragment of the cosmos, a wandering comet or shattered asteroid, crossed the sky during those uncertain years. It blazed for a brief moment, a streak of fire reflecting in the frozen lakes below. Then it fell, somewhere far across the northern lands. the impact would have been blinding. For a moment, night turned to day. Heat swept across the landscape, igniting forests that had stood for centuries. The air filled with smoke and ash. Dust rose high into the atmosphere, wrapping the planet in a veil of shadow. Sunlight dimmed. Days turned grey. The world cooled again, but this time from above. The dust blocked the warmth, scattering light until the sky took on a faint, metallic hue. Snow began to fall more often, soft at first, then relentless. Seasons blurred together. In this long twilight, ice returned to the valleys it had once abandoned. Somewhere between water and fire, between flood and flame, the earth slipped quietly into the Younger Dryas. A return to cold, unannounced, unresisted. The planet was not broken, only changed. It had turned its face slightly away from the sun, as if needing to rest. And through it all, humanity endured. On distant plains, hunters watched the sky, seeing in its dimness both beauty and warning. They felt the shift in the air, the way the wind carried new scents. Ash, ice, distant rain. They followed the herds, always moving, always listening. Around their campfires they spoke softly of the changing earth, though they could not name the reasons. They simply knew that the world had become different, quieter, slower. The great glaciers crept forward once more, slow and patient, pressing their weight across the land. Beneath their frozen bellies, rivers still flowed, carving new paths beneath the silence. Mountains groaned under the strain, their edges ground into powder by the march of ice. Even in stillness, the planet was in motion. Years passed, centuries even. The balance held, delicate and exact. Oceans cooled, winds stabilized. The dust began to settle. Slowly, faintly, light returned. Beneath the grey veil, the sun reached the earth again, weak but persistent. Snow glistened, streams began to trickle. The long night was ending. From the melting edges of glaciers, the rivers carried new life. They spread minerals across the valleys, feeding the soil that had once been buried deep. The air smelled clean again, cold but alive. The forests began their return, young trees rising through the frost like quiet prayers. Water, once the force of destruction, became the source of renewal. It filled the lakes that still mirror the sky today, the same water that once carved entire continents into new shapes. Fire, too, left its mark, its ash feeding the ground, its warmth lingering in the memory of the stones. And in that quiet balance between elements, the earth began to heal. To imagine it now is to step into a dream, one of slow movement and endless calm. The rivers no longer roar, but whisper. The glaciers no longer advance, but sleep. The wind still carries the faint echo of those ancient changes, a memory written in the rhythm of waves in the chill of early dawn. Perhaps it was never truly destruction, but transformation, the planet turning one page of its long, patient story, a story told not in words, but in ice and water, in silence and light. Tonight, as you listen, imagine that you are standing at the edge of that ancient world. The air is cool against your skin. The sky above you is wide and grey, the colour of soft steel. Far away, a river moves. Slow, steady, endless. You can hear it breathe the way the earth once did. Let that sound carry you. Let it calm the thoughts that move too quickly. Let it remind you that even in the great cycles of change, there is peace. The same peace that followed the floods, the same stillness that lingered after the fires. Echoes of the rising sea. When the old world sank into silence. When the warmth finally came, it came with a whisper, soft at first, like the gentle sigh of spring returning to the air. Snow melted from the edges of glaciers, trickling into thin streams that gleamed beneath a pale sky. The earth, weary from millennia of frost, began to loosen its frozen breath. Ice that had slept for ages awoke and turned to water, and the water began to move. Slowly, patiently, it gathered itself into rivers that wound through the valleys, into lakes that shimmered under the morning light, and finally into oceans that stretched their hands toward the land.
The sea, once distant and still, began to rise. Inch by inch, year by year, it crept over the world. At first, no one noticed a shoreline shifting here, a wet meadow there. But the change did not stop. The tide reached farther with every season, swallowing the coasts, reclaiming the lowlands. The rhythm of the waves grew deeper, stronger, steady as breath. Within a span of centuries, the ocean had climbed more than 120 meters higher than before.
Villages built near the water vanished beneath it. Forests fell quiet, their roots submerged in salt. Wide plains that had once carried the footsteps of animals and the laughter of people turned into quiet seabeds. Rivers found new paths, old ones disappeared. Mountains became islands. Valleys filled with blue.
Across the continents, the earth remade itself. The outlines of nations yet unborn were drawn not by hands but by tides. The world's heartbeat shifted.
Beneath the shimmering water, the remnants of the old world settled into stillness. Camps once lit by fire faded into the silt. Tools of stone and bone slept under layers of sand. Footprints pressed into ancient clay hardened and vanished beneath waves that had forgotten their names. What remained above the water seemed untouched, yet everything had changed. In the north, where ice still lingered, herds began to thin. Mammoths, once kings of the frost, wandered across shrinking plains, searching for colder ground. Their tusks gleamed in the dim light of long evenings, glacial wind brushing through their fur. But there was no refuge left. As forests crept northward and the grasses turned to wetlands, the great beasts dwindled and were gone. The saber-toothed cats followed, their silent grace lost to hunger. The towering ground sloths disappeared into the trees, and even the ancient bison, thick-shouldered and strong, retreated, leaving empty trails behind them. The earth was shedding its old skin. One by one, the giants of the Ice Age stepped out of history, leaving only the whisper of their passing. In their place came silence, the silence of new forests growing where tundra once stretched endlessly, the silence of waves lapping against freshly carved shores, the silence of the sky, vast, pale, endless, looking down upon a planet forever changed. For humankind, the world was both ending and beginning. The coasts they had known were gone, the rivers they had followed had shifted, and the lands of their ancestors were buried beneath the sea. Yet they moved forward, as they always had. Curious, resilient, unafraid of the unknown. They built new shelters near the rising water, watching the horizon as it shimmered with the color of rebirth. The sea, once a boundary, became a bridge. People learned its moods. The calm mornings, the quiet tides, the dark tempests that rolled in from the horizon. They built boats and followed the fish that moved with the seasons. They watched the stars reflected in the water, mapping the sky by the waves. The world had grown wider and humanity grew with it. But the memory of what was lost remained. Beneath every gentle tide lay a story, a forest that once stood, a valley that once rang with the sound of voices. Beneath every sunrise over the water lay the shadow of what the ocean had taken. It was a quiet morning, one that stretched beyond words, absorbed into the rhythm of the earth itself. The air was softer now, scented with salt and green things. Rain fell more often, and rivers cut new paths toward the coasts. Each storm reshaped the land just a little more. The world was fluid, shifting, alive in ways it had never been before. It was as if the planet had discovered movement again. Not the violent upheaval of destruction, but the gentle persistence of transformation. The humans who lived through these centuries could not see the full picture, yet they felt it. In the pull of the tides, in the patterns of the stars, in the whisper of the wind across their skin. They began to tell stories of a world that had drowned, of lands swallowed by the ocean, of mountains that became islands. The sea was no longer only water, it was memory. And still, life continued. Fish filled the newly formed bays, birds nested on the edges of cliffs that had once been hills. Grasses took root in soil left behind by the retreating glaciers. Every ending left room for something new to grow. Some nights, as the moon rose high over the waves, its reflection stretched endlessly toward the horizon, a silver path across the sea. Those who watched it from the shore might have felt the quiet pull of the past, the sense that beneath that shimmering surface lay the bones of another world. Yet the sound of the tide was soothing, timeless, eternal. It spoke not of loss but of rhythm, the same rhythm that had guided the earth since its beginning. And so the great transition unfolded not with chaos, but with calm inevitability. The world that had been cold and hard gave way to one that was softer, warmer, fluid. The ice melted, the seas rose, and the continents reshaped themselves under the steady hand of time. What was once a frozen kingdom became a cradle for new life. The last of the ice glittered on distant peaks, fading slowly under the breath of the sun. Rivers wound their way toward the swelling seas, singing softly over stones polished by the ages. In the heart of this transformation, silence held, not emptiness but peace. The old world closed its eyes quietly, sinking beneath the waves with the grace of something ancient and complete. In its place, the new world opened, green, shimmering, alive with possibility. And somewhere, far beneath the surface of the sea, in the cold and endless dark, the memory of the first world still rests. A world of giants and frost, of wind and snow, of silence so deep it felt eternal. Now it sleeps under layers of time and tide, whispering faintly through the waves. The earth does not forget, it simply changes. Whispers of stone and sea, the silent remnants of an ancient earth. Across the vast face of our planet, the earth still remembers. Beneath mountains and oceans, through the quiet layers of stone and sand, it carries within it the echoes of a time long past. When ice ruled the land, when floods reshaped the continents, and when humankind stood on the fragile edge of awakening. These memories do not shout, they whisper. They rest in the patterns of rock, in the smoothness of a valley's curve, in the hidden ruins beneath the sea. And if you listen long enough for the noise of the present to fade, you can almost hear the soft breathing of that ancient world. In the northwest of North America, where the wind moves freely over plateaus of basalt, there lies a scar upon the land known as the channeled scablands. It stretches for hundreds of miles, carved not by rivers, but by something far greater, by walls of water that once thundered across the plains. Long ago, when a glacial lake, the size of a sea, burst through its icy dam, It unleashed torrents that swept through the valleys with unimaginable force. Today the canyons remain deep, silent, almost alien. Their surfaces are polished smooth by the memory of motion. Standing there, surrounded by quiet stone, one might almost feel the ghost of that rushing water, which did not violent but eternal, a force both wild and strangely peaceful. Across the ocean between what is now England and mainland Europe, there once stretched a vast and fertile land, Doggerland. For thousands of years, it connected two great regions, covered in forests and rivers where deer grazed and people built their homes. Then the sea began to rise. Slowly, the land sank beneath the waves, and the rivers turned to salt. Today, fishermen pulling their nets from the North Sea still bring up bones, tools, fragments of hearths, pieces of a world now sleeping below the tides. Under the moonlight, when the waters are calm, it's easy to imagine that ancient land still waiting, its forests swaying gently in the rhythm of the waves above. Far to the east, beyond deserts and monsoon rains, lies another secret beneath the sea, the Gulf of Cambay off the coast of India. Deep in its silty depths, sonar images reveal geometric shapes, patterns that do not belong to chaos. They suggest the presence of walls and avenues, perhaps the outlines of a city long lost to rising waters. Divers describe pillars half buried in mud, the faint suggestion of steps leading nowhere. Whether these are the remains of a forgotten culture or the random poetry of nature itself, no one can say for certain. Yet the idea lingers, that where now there is ocean, there was once laughter, firelight, and life. To the northeast, beyond the islands of Japan, beneath the rolling currents near Yonaguni, there lies a structure that seems to defy the sea. The Yonaguni Monument, as it is called, rests quietly under 30 meters of water, a vast series of terraces and steps carved from stone. Some say it was shaped by human hands, others believe it was born of the earth's own slow sculpting. But as divers glide through its corridors, the world grows still. Light filters down in soft waves, painting the stone with shifting blues. Each edge feels deliberate, every platform ancient. Whether built or born, it stands as a bridge between nature and memory, between the known and the forgotten. Across the oceans in South America, high in the thin air of the Andes, lie the ruins of Tiwanaku and Sacsayhuaman. Their stones are immense, their surfaces fitted together so precisely that even a blade of grass cannot slip between them. Each block weighs tons, yet they sit balanced in perfect silence, untouched by time. The wind moves through the corridors like a song, humming softly through the narrow gaps. These walls, enduring through centuries of storms and sun, tell not of conquest but of patience, of a people who understood the rhythm of stone, who worked not against the earth but with it. And then there is Göbekli Tepe, in the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey. Beneath layers of soil, archaeologists uncovered great T-shaped pillars arranged in circles, some carved with images of animals and abstract signs. It is older than any known temple, older even than agriculture itself. A creation from more than 11,000 years ago, built by hands that had only just emerged from the chill of the Younger Dryas. Each pillar rises from the earth like a memory, its surface worn smooth by time. The carvings still whisper of the creatures that roamed then. Foxes, cranes, lions. Here, humanity had begun to dream together again, to build, to mark their place upon the turning earth. It was not the dawn of civilization, but the first flicker of light before it. Farther west in the desert sands of Egypt, the great Sphinx sits watching the horizon, half lion, half human, entirely timeless. The surface of its stone bears scars not only of wind, but of rain. Deep grooves that tell of a time when the land was greener, when clouds gathered and fell upon the desert. Scholars debate the age of those marks, but the stone itself remains silent. It has seen the rise and fall of kingdoms, the shifting of stars across the sky. The Sphinx is not merely a monument, it is a witness. Its eyes, carved in another epoch, still gaze upon the same sun, unblinking, eternal. All these places, Scablands, Doggerland, Cambay, Yonaguni, Tiwanaku, Göbekli Tepe, the Sphinx, are like pages of an ancient book written in stone and water. Each tells a story of change, of loss, of endurance. Together they form a quiet chorus, the Earth's memory murmuring through the ages. If you close your eyes, you can imagine walking through them, the crunch of sand underfoot at Göbekli Tepe, the cool weight of water pressing around you at Yonaguni, the smell of salt above Doggerland's ghostly plain. The world hums softly, the past breathing just beneath the surface. The traces of those who came before us are everywhere, though we rarely see them. Beneath every field, every wave, every stone path lies the faint heartbeat of another age. The mountains themselves are the bones of the earth, the rivers its veins, carrying whispers of what was once whole. Even the wind that passes over your skin has touched the ruins of Tiwanaku, the cliffs of Scablands, the sands of Egypt. The patience of the planet is infinite. It builds and unbuilds, shapes and smooths, forever writing and rewriting its story in silence. Erosion, sediment, the slow folding of the crust. All of it a kind of gentle music, a rhythm that only the earth can hear. What seems like destruction is simply another form of creation, the endless dance between time and matter. And within that dance, humankind has always been present. Fragile yet enduring, transient yet eternal in memory. Each ruin, each mark, each fragment left behind is both a goodbye and a promise. The flood may have washed away the cities, the ice may have erased the paths, but the essence remains, carried in the stones, in the soil, in the stories that we tell under quiet skies. Tonight, as the world outside grows still, imagine drifting through these forgotten places. Let your mind wander through submerged streets, past pillars half buried in sand, across valleys carved by ancient waters. There is no sound here but the soft hush of the wind, the faint echo of your own heartbeat mingling with the earth's. You are not separate from this story, you are part of it. The traces are not only in stone, they live in us, in our hands that build, in our eyes that seek, in our dreams that reach beyond the horizon. The same curiosity that led ancient builders to raise pillars in the dust still guides us to uncover what they left behind. The same wonder that made them look at the stars still burns quietly within us. The earth is patient, and time is gentle. Together they shape everything, mountains, seas and souls. Long after we are gone, the world will continue its slow turning, its quiet breathing. New lands will rise, old ones will sleep beneath the waves. And perhaps one day, far from now, others will walk upon the stones we leave, wondering who we were, listening to our echoes through the ages. So breathe deeply and let that thought settle like mist upon your mind. The story of the earth is not one of endings, but of endless becoming. The ruins, the floods, the carvings, the forgotten lands beneath the sea. They are not relics of loss, but reminders of continuity. Time moves like water. It reshapes everything it touches, but it never truly takes anything away. Every mark, every grain, every whisper remains, folded gently into the fabric of the world. And somewhere beneath the ice and stone, beneath the quiet weight of centuries, the earth still remembers. patient, calm, eternal. Whispers of the flood, the memory that never forgot. In the quiet distance of time before the rise of cities and the written word, humanity spoke in stories. Around fires that flickered under the open stars, voices carried across generations, soft as wind through the reeds. They told of waters that once rose without end, waters that swallowed valleys, forests and homes, that turned familiar paths into rivers and plains into seas. These stories, whispered and reshaped over thousands of years, became the gentle heartbeat of our collective memory. The way the Earth's great changes found their reflection in human hearts. From continent to continent, the same tale appears, told in different tongues, shaped by different skies. In the cold north, elders once spoke of floods that swept across endless plains of ice when the great beasts vanished and the land itself seemed to drift away. In the deserts of the Middle East, storytellers described a deluge that cleansed the world, leaving only a few who survived to begin again. Across the oceans, the ancient peoples of the Americas sang of waters that chased the mountains, of nights when stars fell and the sea climbed higher than any man had ever seen. These were not myths in the beginning. They were memories. Woven into the language of dreams, they were the way early humans understood what could not be explained. Long before maps or science, there was wonder and fear and the human need to remember. Around each fire, children listened with wide eyes, their faces lit by the glow of embers, their minds painting pictures of waves that roared like gods. Time softened these tales, sanding down their sharp edges until they became lullabies. In India, the story of a man guided by a sacred fish who led him to safety as the waters rose. In Greece, the echo of Deucalion and Pyrrha casting stones to rebuild humankind. In the high mountains of the Andes, whispers of survivors who climbed to sacred peaks while the world below drowned. In every story, there is the same rhythm, a beginning washed away and a quiet return. Imagine those first storytellers. They had seen rivers burst their banks, the sky darken with rain, lightning split the horizon. They had felt the trembling of the earth, the way the ground shivers underfoot when something immense awakens deep below. They had watched the sea creep closer each year, swallowing the places where their ancestors had once lived. And so, they told the story, not as history, but as a warning, as a remembrance, as a way to make sense of the vastness that surrounded them. As centuries passed, the world changed, but the story stayed. The language shifted, the names were forgotten, but the pattern endured. Each generation breathed new life into it, shaping it with the colors of their own time. Some added gods and thunder, others spoke of stars falling or mountains cracking, yet beneath the variations the same truth remained, that once, long ago, the earth had risen against its boundaries, and the people had to begin again.
It is beautiful, isn't it, how the mind of humankind refuses to forget. Even without books, without walls, without the permanence of stone, these memories drifted through time like the echo of a song. They crossed deserts and oceans, carried not by ships or maps, but by voices, and wherever they went, they changed just enough to belong. In every culture, the flood became a mirror, not just of water and loss, but of renewal.
Listen closely and you can almost hear them still. Those ancient voices carried on the wind. A mother in a hut beside a river, telling her child of the day the sky wept. An elder tracing lines in the dirt, showing where the water came from and where it went. A sailor on a new shore, speaking softly of lands that no longer rise above the waves. These are the ways memory survives. not through monuments or written word, but through the steady rhythm of telling and listening. And perhaps deep down these stories comforted those who told them. To know that even after the flood the world had begun anew, that after every loss something returned. There is peace in that thought, a calm acceptance of change as part of the great design. The water comes, it shapes, it leaves, and life continues. When we look at the earth today, we can still see the remnants of those memories in the land itself. The seabed that once was home to forests. The valleys carved by floods so old they have no names. The bones of creatures that watched the world transform. The earth remembers, and through our stories, we remember with it. Some say that myths are only imagination, the dreaming of early minds. But listen long enough, and you will hear the truth woven through them. For the story of the flood is not about punishment or fear, it is about change, about endurance, about the way life persists even when the world shifts beneath it. The flood is the earth breathing in and out, the ocean reminding us that all things flow. Every culture gave the flood its own sound, its own color. Some made it a roar of divine anger, others a cleansing sleep. To the people of the islands, it was the tide that carried them to new homes. To those in the highlands, it was the memory of safety, of the mountain that kept them alive. And to the desert dwellers, it was a dream of water that once was, a memory they could almost taste in the air. When night falls and the world grows still, the rhythm of those old tales becomes clearer. They move like a current beneath the noise of time. You can hear it in the whisper of rain on windows, in the soft crash of waves along the shore, in the way the earth hums after a storm. It is the same voice that once spoke in the darkness, beside a fire, saying, "We remember." Generation after generation, the telling continues. Even now in books and songs, in films and art, the flood returns, not as an ending, but as an echo of something ancient and human. We retell it because it is in our blood, this rhythm of loss and renewal, this sense that beneath every destruction lies the seed of something new. If you close your eyes, you can almost drift into that memory. The sound of distant thunder, the air thick with rain, the scent of earth as it yields to water. You can see people standing on high ground, watching their world dissolve into the horizon, holding each other in quiet awe. And then, in the silence after, you can feel the peace that follows, the calm after the storm, the soft gleam of sunrise over a reshaped earth. The stories never truly belong to the past. They are living things, still breathing through us. Each time they are spoken, they awaken the same calm understanding. That change is part of the world's design, that even the greatest waves cannot wash away the memory of where we came from. So, as the night deepens and your mind drifts, let the stories carry you. Let them flow like the rivers they once described. Smooth, endless, unhurried. Let them remind you that every voice that ever spoke them, every heart that ever listened, is part of the same great continuity. The flood came and went, but the memory remains. Soft as a sigh, steady as breath, alive in the pulse of the earth. It is not a story of fear, but of remembrance. The waters rose, the world changed, and still the song was sung. That song, gentle and eternal, is the lullaby of humankind, the one we still hum beneath our breath when the rain falls and the world feels vast again. The gentle dawn when humanity began. Again. When the long cold finally loosened its hold, the world exhaled. The ice that had once silenced continents began to retreat, and the air, once sharp and heavy with frost, softened into a tender mist. Rivers, freed from their glassy prisons, found their voices again, whispering over stones, singing through valleys. Forests stretched their branches toward the returning sun. The earth, slow and steady, awakened into warmth. And within that quiet rebirth, humanity stirred too, fragile, hopeful, and infinitely patient. They were the survivors of 1,000 years of cold. Their footprints followed the lines of the retreating ice, tracing paths across lands that had been hidden for centuries. They carried little but memory. The memory of how to endure, how to build fire, how to listen to the rhythm of the seasons. The air was clearer now, the sky wider. The people who walked through this softened light were both ancient and new, born again into a gentler world. The first thing they did was to stop moving. For generations they had followed the herds, wandered with the weather, lived from the chase and the gather. But as the land warmed, they began to see permanence in the soil, in the way seeds took root when scattered, in how the earth responded when tended. Somewhere, in a valley filled with meltwater and birdsong, someone pressed a handful of grain into damp ground and returned weeks later to find it had grown. And in that small miracle, the story of civilization began to turn its first page. It was a slow awakening. They learned to stay through the seasons, to mark time, not by hunger or migration, but by the flowering of trees, the ripening of fruit, the call of insects in the tall grass. Villages rose where rivers curved and soil was rich. At first, they were no more than clusters of shelters, stones stacked against the wind, branches woven together with reeds. But the walls held, and within them the warmth of human voices grew. Fires burned longer now, not just for heat, but for comfort. They began to plant intentionally. Wheat, barley, lentils. The ground that had once been wilderness became a partner, an ally. With patience, the soil gave back. The people learned the language of the land, when to dig, when to rest, when to water, when to wait. They raised animals too. Goats, sheep, and dogs that had once hunted beside them now shared their homes. Each small act of care became a thread in a vast web of connection, binding humanity more deeply to the earth that sustained it. The survivors of the Younger Dryas carried with them an ancient wisdom, knowledge written not on stone, but in instinct. They had watched the skies, felt the weight of seasons in their bones, seen what the world could do when balance was lost. That memory made them cautious, reverent. They built with stone because they had seen wood swept away. They stored grain because they had lived through hunger. They learned to look beyond their own lives, to prepare not only for today, but for tomorrow. And so they began to teach. Around the fires that now burned in settled hearths, they shared what they knew. Which plants could heal, which stars marked the changing seasons, which wines carried rain. The children listened, their eyes reflecting the flickering light, their minds weaving the wisdom of their elders into the future. With each retelling, humanity became a little more secure, a little more aware of its place in the great cycle of earth and sky. The world was changing still, but the pace was different now, not sudden, not violent, but patient. The forests that had once been grey with frost were deep green again. The animals returned, deer stepping quietly through ferns, birds building nests in branches heavy with leaves. The rivers shimmered with life, their waters clear and cold from the melting ice far to the north. Humanity watched and learned, building its rhythm alongside nature's own. Communities began to form, not just families, but networks of trust. They built together, worked together, sang together. They shared their harvests, their stories, their tools. In the quiet spaces between their labors, they began to dream of beauty. Hands that once chipped flint for survival now shaped it into art. Stones became beads, clay became vessels. On the walls of their dwellings they painted the world as they saw it, animals, patterns, the rising sun. And in those painted lines you can almost see their peace. There was no rush, no empire, no noise of conquest, only the slow, steady rhythm of life returning to balance. The people moved in harmony with the land, and the land in turn gave them all they needed. They began to measure time by the sky. The stars that had once guided them through the endless migrations now became their calendar. The moon marked their cycles, the sun marked their seasons. Each dawn was a promise, each dusk a moment of gratitude. They learned to build not just for shelter, but for meaning. Stone circles to honor the heavens, pillars to mark the solstice, shrines to the forces that sustained them. Göbekli Tepe, rising from the earth of what is now Turkey, stands as a testament to this quiet devotion, a circle of carved stone built not for survival, but for remembrance. In those early settlements, humanity found something it had not known before: continuity. Life no longer began and ended with the chase or the storm. It extended forward, through seed, through child, through memory. The land itself became an inheritance, a story passed down in furrows and footprints. Under the soft glow of each new sunrise, people looked across fields that once were tundra and felt a sense of belonging. The ice had gone, but its lesson remained: that the earth could change without warning, that survival was a gift, not a guarantee. And so they cherished it. They built not to dominate the world, but to live within it, listening always for its subtle music, the sigh of wind through grass, the hum of insects in summer, the steady heartbeat of the soil beneath their feet. In the evenings, when the work was done and the fires burned low, the elders spoke of the time before, of the cold that had covered everything, of the floods that had come, of the stars that had watched it all. But they spoke not with fear, only with wonder. For to remember was to understand the preciousness of the present. The children listened, lulled by the rhythm of their voices, by the crackle of firewood and the chorus of night. The past, once filled with chaos, had become a story, gentle now, softened by distance. The warmth spread slowly, year by year. New lands opened, new forests grew. Humanity followed the rivers, expanding into the world that had once been locked in ice. And with every step, they carried with them the memory of what had been, the balance between fragility and strength, the deep knowing that life always finds a way. Even now, in the ruins of ancient villages buried beneath layers of time, that memory lingers. It hums through the stones, through the patterns of the earth, through us. We are the continuation of that first dawn, the living echo of those who looked upon a thawing world and chose to begin again. And so, beneath the same sun that once rose over the first fields, we too keep moving, slowly, softly, through the long breath of history. The forests have changed, the rivers have shifted, but the rhythm remains. Humanity, ever patient, ever curious, still follows that quiet melody, the song of survival, of renewal, of the gentle dawn that never truly ended. Beneath the layers, the gentle pursuit of an ancient truth. The earth keeps its secrets well. Beneath the soil, beneath the rivers and the frozen plains, it holds the quiet story of ages, a record not written in ink, but in stone, dust, and time. Every layer of sediment, every shift in a grain of sand, carries a whisper from the past. And for those who listen closely, for those who move gently enough to hear, there are messages still waiting to be understood. In the modern age, as we look back across the millennia, a question has begun to stir again. What really happened at the end of the last ice age? The period known as the Younger Dryas. That sudden and mysterious return to cold after the world had already begun to thaw continues to shimmer like a mirage on the edge of our understanding. Scientists, archaeologists, dreamers and skeptics alike have all leaned close, pressing their ears against the heartbeat of the planet, trying to make sense of the rhythm beneath the noise. Some believe it was simply nature's own breath, a fluctuation in the climate, the Earth adjusting its balance after the long, frozen sleep. To them, the Younger Dryas was a pause, a deep inhale before the world exhaled into warmth again. Others, more curious and perhaps more daring, suspect something else, that the sudden cold was the echo of a greater catastrophe, one that wiped away not only landscapes, but memories of a world that came before. It is a tantalizing idea, one that draws both wonder and skepticism, that humanity may not have begun from simplicity rising to complexity, but rather from loss, from rediscovery, that there may have been civilizations before the flood, before the long silence of ice and water. The thought lingers like mist over an ancient lake, impossible to grasp fully, yet impossible to dismiss. Beneath the fields and forests of our modern world, traces of this mystery remain. Researchers dig through layers of soil, peeling back time one careful inch at a time. In tiny fragments, shards of stone tools, charcoal from ancient fires, microscopic grains of platinum, they find hints of a story long erased. Each discovery is small, almost imperceptible, but together they weave a pattern that seems to speak of sudden change, of impact, of renewal. The Earth itself bears the scars. Across continents, scientists have found a strange, dark layer of sediment, thin but distinct, marking the very start of the Younger Dryas. It contains signs of fire, of melting, of cosmic dust. Some see in it the fingerprint of a celestial visitor, perhaps a comet that shattered in the sky, scattering fragments that burned the forests and clouded the heavens. Others see only coincidence, the rhythm of natural cycles misunderstood by the impatient human eye. The debate is quiet but persistent, unfolding not in anger, but in curiosity. For every theory, another arises, not to destroy it, but to refine it. It is the way of science, and perhaps of humanity itself, an endless dialogue with the unknown. Beneath the hum of laboratories, beneath the clicking of data and the hum of machines, there lies something older, the same patient wonder that drove our ancestors to carve meaning into stone. Each new excavation adds a brushstroke to the grand, unfinished canvas of history. In Turkey, Göbekli Tepe stands as an enigma, vast pillars carved and placed more than 11,000 years ago, older than agriculture, older than writing. How, in the shadow of an ice age, did hands so ancient raise such monuments of thought and purpose? To some, it is proof that humanity had already begun to dream beyond survival. To others, it is simply the inevitable flowering of a species that had learned to endure. Further west in the Americas, researchers uncover bones and artifacts that hint at people who walked those lands long before anyone believed possible. In the depths of the ocean, sonar scans reveal shapes too straight, too symmetrical, to be entirely nature's design. Yet the sea keeps its secrets well. The deeper one looks, the more elusive they become. And still we continue to listen. Perhaps the fascination with the Younger Dryas is not only about science, but something deeper, an echo of recognition. Somewhere within us there is a memory of loss, of starting over. It hums beneath the surface of our stories, our myths, our art. The great floods, the fallen cities, the gods who came from the sea. These tales are not just imagination, but perhaps a faint recollection of what the earth has already lived through. Each discovery feels like a heartbeat from that forgotten world. Soft, distant, but alive. A fragment of obsidian shaped by human hands. A fossilized seed from a forest that no longer exists. A cave painting of stars drawn by eyes that once saw constellations unclouded by history. The scientists studying these traces are, in their own quiet way, poets. They listen to stone the way a musician listens to silence, for rhythm, for tone, for meaning. They know that the earth speaks slowly, that it takes patience to hear her. The layers of silt, the patterns of pollen, the magnetic whispers locked in rock. All of these are verses in the planet's long poem. And as we uncover them gently, we begin to see ourselves in the reflection. It may not matter whether there was once a lost civilization or only scattered tribes who looked at the stars and wondered. What matters is that we are still asking the same questions they once asked. We are still tracing the same patterns in the sky, still listening for the same truths in the wind. In every hypothesis and counter-argument, in every paper and excavation, there is the same pulse, the desire to understand where we come from and, by extension, who we are. The earth does not hurry to answer. It waits, patient as ever, its truth layered in silence. The stones do not lie, but they do not rush to speak. They crumble slowly, whispering only to those who stay long enough to hear the faint music beneath their surface. Sometimes, when a researcher brushes away the dust of 10,000 years and finds something unexpected, a carving, a tool, a glimmer of metal, there is a stillness that falls over the moment. The past, for an instant, feels close enough to touch. The air itself seems to pause, as though the world remembers with them. Each discovery is a conversation between what was and what is. And like all good conversations, it unfolds gently, layer by layer. There are no certainties here, only questions that deepen as they are answered. But in that uncertainty lies something beautiful. The sense that we are part of a story far older and larger than we imagined. Even now, as satellites scan the surface of the Earth and machines measure what human eyes cannot see, the spirit of those early seekers endures. The curiosity that led ancient hands to carve stone is the same curiosity that drives modern minds to dig into the unknown. The tools have changed, but the yearning remains. In the end, it may not be proof that we find, but connection. Each core sample, each excavation, each quiet moment in a field of dust brings us closer not just to history, but to ourselves. The Younger Dryas, whether cosmic accident or natural rhythm, reminds us that change is woven into the fabric of existence, that civilizations rise and fall, but curiosity, like the tide, always returns. The scientists will continue to listen and the earth will continue to whisper. Perhaps one day the full story will unfold, or perhaps it will always remain partly hidden, preserved in the silence between discoveries. But that is the beauty of it. The search itself is the story. And so beneath the endless sky, humanity keeps its patient vigil, watching, digging, listening. The soil yields its secrets in fragments, the past reveals itself in whispers, and through it all, the earth hums softly, reminding us that we are only the latest chapter in a book still being written. Echoes of stillness, the earth's quiet turning. The Younger Dryas, that long breath of winter between ages, was more than an interruption in climate. It was a pause in the rhythm of the planet, a moment when the Earth seemed to hold its breath before beginning again. The cold had lingered, reshaping rivers and memories alike, and then, slowly, warmth returned. The world began to soften. Ice turned to water, silence turned to sound, and the pulse of life spread once more across the land. It was the beginning of everything we know. As the air grew mild and the soil loosened beneath the touch of spring, humankind rose from the frost and began to build again. Seeds were pressed into damp earth, animals were tamed, fires burned not for survival, but for gathering. Across valleys once carved by glaciers, the first villages appeared, small clusters of hope and patience. The earth, in her slow grace, allowed the human story to begin anew. In the hills of what is now Turkey, they raised Göbekli Tepe, pillars of stone rising like frozen prayers against the morning light. The carvings upon them spoke of animals, stars and spirits, of the world reborn after the long cold. Far away, beneath the golden sands of Egypt, the Sphinx gazed toward the horizon, its face worn not just by wind, but by time itself. These monuments endure not as triumphs of stone, but as gentle reminders of resilience, of the human will, to remember even when all else is lost. Each stone, each grain of earth, carries memory. Beneath our feet lie the quiet archives of everything that has ever been. Layers upon layers of wind, water, and will. The soil beneath a meadow today may once have been a seabed or the floor of an ancient forest. Every mountain was once a riverbed, every breeze once touched a glacier's edge. The planet keeps its past not in words but in patterns, written across rock, sung through the whisper of the wind. And through all of it, the earth continues to turn. Day folds gently into night, and night into day again, a rhythm as old as the first dawn. Oceans breathe, mountains rest, forests sway in unison with the air. The motion is so vast, so seamless that we rarely feel it. And yet it carries us always, quietly, patiently, through time. In this great movement, humanity finds its own reflection. We too move in cycles of growth and rest, of building and remembering. The same calm persistence that shapes the continents lives within us. When we look at Göbekli Tepe or trace the lines of the Sphinx's weathered face, we are not just seeing history, we are seeing ourselves, the part of us that endures through change, that continues to reach for meaning beneath the endless sky. So let the world be quiet now. Let the hum of the present fade into the low, steady breath of the planet. Somewhere, deep within that stillness, the echoes of the past continue to murmur, not as warnings, but as songs of continuity. The ice has come and gone, the seas have risen and fallen. And through it all, life has listened, learned, and begun again. The earth turns, the stars drift above, the wind moves gently through the trees. And in this unbroken rhythm, soft, patient, eternal, humanity remains. Small, curious, and awake to the music of time. Close your eyes now and let the day drift quietly away. You've done enough, thought enough, felt enough. The world can wait until morning. For now, this is your time, a space where nothing is needed of you, where you can simply be. Take a slow, deep breath in. Feel the air filling your chest, the gentle rise and fall that reminds you you're alive. Let your shoulders soften, your hands loosen, your heartbeat steady into calm. With every breath, let go of worry, of noise, of the weight you carried through the day. Imagine the air around you turning softer, like a warm blanket wrapping you in peace. The night is kind. Outside, the world hums in quiet harmony. The soft sigh of the wind, the hush of distant stars. Everything is still, and you are part of that stillness. Your body grows heavier, your mind lighter, as you sink deeper into comfort. You are safe here, you are enough. You have arrived at the gentle edge of rest. Let dreams find you slowly, like waves touching the shore. Let them carry you somewhere calm and golden, where time doesn't matter and everything feels at ease. Sleep well, dear one. May your dreams be soft, your heart light, and your spirit free. The world will be here when you wake, bright, new, and waiting just for you.